Hi, everyone. I'm Linda Sheldon-Feld with the International Grief Institute and Grief Diaries, and this is Moments of Hope, a show featuring people who turn pain into purpose to do good things in the world. And tonight we are talking about a really interesting and important subject about police transparency and one father's fight for justice for his daughter. But before I introduce tonight's guest, I want to share with you that we have a special show this Friday night where my guest is the Hollywood mobster, the mob boss of Hollywood, Ori Spado. And he's joining me to share his side of the story Friday night, right here on Facebook Grief Diaries at 8 p.m. Eastern. So it's a special show, and I'm super excited. So join us Friday night. He's going to be answering any questions you ask about his life as a mobster. And I'm not going to share with you how I know him. So tonight's guest is Larry Young. Larry, you lost your daughter Molly in 2012 when she was found dead from a gunshot wound to the head in her apartment. And it took you on this path through trying to get answers and being met with roadblocks at the very hands of the system that's supposed to bring justice. So take us back to 2012. What happened?
Well, her ex-boyfriend, had recently broken up with her boyfriend, and it was due to her finding out she was pregnant, and he would not take care of her. And so then she was living with her grandmother and mother temporarily. She had moved out of a house she lived in, and at 3 o'clock in the morning, he somehow convinced her to come over, even though they were not, she had nothing to do with him anymore. And what we can see in the records is he got her to come over by saying, help me, over and over. And she went over to his apartment at 3 in the morning, approximately. We don't know the exact time. We know that she called him 3 times at 3:49 a.m., and we suppose that's when he let her in to his apartment, and she was found dead the next morning at 9 a.m. His roommate arrived at 5:30, according to the record, so she had been shot in the top of the head sometime between 4 a.m. and 5:30 a.m.
First off, I'm very, very sorry for your loss. Having lost a daughter myself, I know the deep anguish that is we can't explain to those who haven't experienced it. So my sincerest condolences to you. So with Molly, from that point forward, not only were you faced with the shock and horror of being told that your daughter is dead, but then having to navigate this system that it's not like someone hands you a handbook and says, here, this is what you're supposed to do to get answers, right? It's trying to get answers from law enforcement and being met with crickets. So take us to that point when you started looking for answers and when things weren't adding up for you.
Well, the 911 call was at 9:02 a.m., and we weren't notified till 12 noon. The suspect already had his mom, dad, and lawyer there around 10:30.
And so when you say suspect, are you thinking the boyfriend?
There's a lot of forensic evidence that makes him the main suspect.
Okay.
She was found dead laying next to his bed.
Okay. Okay.
Anyway, around noon, we were notified. Molly's mother was notified, and she lived in Carbondale. We've been divorced 25 years. And she notified me then. I wasn't notified by the police department at all. And when I lived 25 miles away, so I drove over there, and they were interrogating Molly's sister. at the time I arrived and wanting to know if Molly was right or left-handed. And because Molly was shot in the left top side of the head and she is right-handed. So I took offense to that because they're questioning a sister that just found out that her sister was murdered
Right.
or shot with the top of the head with a gun, and they're questioning her right or left hand. They've never questioned the suspect if he's right or left-handed. I know he's right-handed, but they've never questioned him in the records. So what happened is I left there. I asked them who their supervisor was, and because I was on the police and fire merit board in my hometown, I asked who their supervisor was, and I want to talk to him. I want the first responding officer's what he says about it. Well, I went to the Carbondale police station and asked for the first responding officer, and he didn't come out. They sent out a lieutenant from the Illinois State Police, and when the lieutenant came out, he's in the lobby. He asked me what I wanted to know, and I said I want to know the who, what, when, where, and why. What's going on here?
Yeah.
And he said, he started telling me, and I said, is that not his coworker behind that window, the dispatcher that's behind that window right there, and this room that we're standing in, is they can hear every word we're saying? Is that not true? And he said, yeah. And I said, let's go outside. So we go outside, and the state police officer's first words out of his mouth, while my wife was with me, said, father to father, Carbondale police botched the case. They let him wash his hands and change clothes at the scene. He's not cooperating. He was supposed to be at work at 7 a.m. and the 911 calls at 9 a.m. He didn't call in for work late or anything. They repeatedly tried to reach him and no answer is what they're saying. And basically he's telling me he believes he did it without saying that. You know, he's saying he's a suspect, a major suspect, because he called it in as a drug overdose also.
So he called 911 at 9 a.m. at least 3 hours.
His roommate called 911.
His roommate did. Okay.
He took the phone from his roommate and reported it as a drug overdose.
And yet she had a gunshot wound to the left side of her head.
Massive gunshot wound with a hollow point bullet. Her whole skull was crushed.
And they're asking your daughter, who is in shock, whether her sister, who's now deceased, is either right or left-handed.
That's right.
And so as a parent, what was going through you besides your blood boiling?
You go in shock, and you're not really, it's not a grieving time initially. It's a shock time. You know, you're angry and shocked, and, you know, and so I administered the test to prospective police officers. I was secretary of the board of the police merit board, so I knew the protocol of what was supposed to be happening, and I knew it wasn't happening. Right after the 911 call, he immediately lawyered up. He refused to give him permission to even search the apartment. She lay there a dead 7 more hours before they let him in the apartment. You know, and so I'm saying, what the heck's going on here?
Yeah.
You know, and I tried to find out where it's at. I couldn't find out where it's at, and I started searching for it. And at 6:30, I found it finally, the apartment, because no one knew where he lived but Molly. You know, none of our family knew.
And so the law enforcement did not tell you where she was?
They would not tell me. I asked. They would not tell me. So
why can't they tell you?
I don't know why. I don't. All I said is we can't tell you where the apartment is. That's their answer. The lieutenant of the state police. He said the crime scene's cordoned off. We will not let anybody in or out until we are able to access the crime scene. He's not cooperating. He's refusing to give consent to search his apartment, search his car. He's refusing to cooperate at all. And he already had a lawyer there before the state police arrived.
And so, just to clarify, his roommate was a police dispatcher, or the ex-boyfriend? He was.
Ex-boyfriend was a police dispatcher, and the roommate was working a night shift at Panera Bread in town.
Okay.
Supposedly, allegedly got off at 5:30. We're not believing that now, but we did then at that point in time. I went on Facebook immediately within a couple of days and seen a post that, from a person that was supposed to be with the boyfriend, that ex-boyfriend, that night, and she was posting to his roommate, "Quit baking and come party with us." Well, I didn't know anything about it. His roommate
Right.
at that time, what he did for a job or anything. So that's
So right from the
what happened.
get-go,
What I
you
don't
had
understand
you
is
had a
how
lot of questions that weren't answered.
how did
And
the Carbondale police go into the scene for an hour, and then the state police have to get search warrants and spend 7 hours getting those search warrants, while valuable evidence is becoming stale? There's never been an answer to that to my satisfaction, or anyone's that I know.
and so how was Molly's death categorized?
Molly's the way the autopsy was performed the next day, and the pathologist, in her conclusion, said based on the evidence that the police officers have found, it could be self-inflicted.
So,
And then later on, when that pathologist report came to a state police, the chief investigator, he wrote a report saying we did not tell that pathologist that this was self-inflicted.
and so what part
Qualified
of that, in your mind as a father, is not adding up? The kid, the former boyfriend, is a police dispatcher. From the very get-go, this is really odd. And I mean, even from someone, on the outside of this circle looking in like myself, this is really odd. And so the former boyfriend, said that she died of a drug overdose, although she had a massive gunshot wound to the head. And it was on the left side of the head. She's right-handed, and the pathologist is saying this is potentially self-inflicted. What did you think at that point?
It was actually in the top of the head, left side.
Okay.
Downward angle, no exit wound. Inside the hairline. So it was not, none of them could tell me of any suicide, self-inflicted wound that was performed in that way. Her right hand was in a clenched fist when they found her. He had 2 6-inch scratches on his side that were fresh. His roommate had 2 scratches that were in the middle of his back between his shoulder blades. We found out later. We didn't know at the time. It's just endless thing. He had blood spatter on the bottom of his pajama pants, 50 plus droplets on the front and back. He moved the body. It's endless. The evidence, the forensic evidence, can't lie. They can't lie. Text messages and journals and all that. They're not. Text messages aren't fingerprints or handwriting.
And
Journals
so
are written.
because of your situation with trying to navigate the justice system and get answers, you were instrumental behind what's now called Molly's Law. And we'll get to that in just a second. But where is the former boyfriend today? Was he ever charged?
He was never charged. He was released that night sometime. I can't see a report on it. I've never seen a report saying what time he was released. We know he was in custody up until 7 p.m. They took his DNA and blood alcohol. And anyway, he was immediately put on administrative leave for 3 months. And he ended up, right now, what I've been told is he is a dispatcher for the St. Louis Fire Department.
Is that right?
He was hired after that as a dispatcher for the St. Louis Fire Department.
So he
got two DUIs between the time of Molly's murder and getting hard there. They said they don't do background checks on that.
Okay. Some things just have no words, no words to that. So he, the former boyfriend, uh, police dispatcher, walks free, although all of that forensic evidence is pointing in one direction. Why do you think he was not arrested? Is there any plausible explanation for? I mean, certainly we are innocent until proven guilty, but your case is so compelling that people like me are wondering why, what's the matter with this picture? What do you think happened?
Well, I say you're innocent until proven guilty, but you're not innocent until because somebody doesn't want to prove you guilty.
Hmm.
That doesn't make you innocent because someone doesn't want to prove you guilty. His father works with all the local law enforcement agencies. He's a deputy sheriff in a neighboring county, but he's a computer expert that handles all the forensics, at least from what I've been told, for all the local law enforcement agencies. The FBI sent him to Hoover, Alabama for 5 weeks, according to his own interviews and his own LinkedIn page, to learn a system called FRED, Forensic Retrieval Extraction Device. And they provided him with that equipment that will analyze deleted history in computers, bring it back out. He's also a phone expert. Both of those items of Molly's were tampered with. Her phone there's deleted messages out of her phone for a whole 3 months worth between the suspect and her phone. And while she was at a concert, someone planted suicide searches in a 2-hour period on her computer. They went back 15 days, but there's a 2-hour window of time that there's suicide searches planted on her computer seconds apart. And they're seconds apart from her text messaging him at the concert.
When she was at the concert. So where she was at was established, and it wasn't near the computer.
Witnesses established it. Her text message phones established it. It's all established. In 6 seconds, some of those suicide searches were placed in her computer 6 seconds apart from her text message and her ex-boyfriend.
And so for some people who say, this is just a bereaved father who can't accept that his daughter died by suicide, what do you say to people who have that mentality, that thought process?
That thought process, I had that thought process before this happened to me. I really feel bad about it, but I felt like, I had a whole different view of what law enforcement was before this happened. Now I realize how bad they really are, certain ones. I realize what lengths they will go to stop the truth from being told. And that leads into what struggle I had to get information about the facts, not a journal entry out of my daughter's journals that they confiscated 8 years prior. She had written 8 years prior. That isn't a fact. That's her own personal venting, I guess you'd say. But a fact is that he had blood spatter on his pajama pants. She had no gunpowder residue on her hands. All those are forensic facts that can't lie. You can't change those after they happen. You can change text messaging. You can change times on a phone. You can change a lot of things, but you can't change those. You can't change blood spatter.
Right.
So I went after those. I didn't know what they were at the time. It took me 2 years to even get the first, even just little bits of information on that. I started the FOIA process. It took me over 2 years to actually get the first FOIA. I didn't even get to hear, no one, including me, did not get to hear the 911 call for 15 months. They did not publish the 911 call because they knew he said it was a drug overdose. They knew that was incriminating. And not only that, his voice on that 911 call is ridiculous. It's like he's ordering a pizza or something. Why would somebody be that calm when they found their ex-girlfriend laying dead next to their bed with blood all over them?
Right. Especially if she's carrying their baby, right? And so explain what FOIA
Well,
is. I know what it is, but for the benefit of our viewers.
well, I didn't know what it was when this happened. A reporter told me what it was. A reporter got all the information that I ended up getting, except for the graphic crime scene photos, before I got it, long before. They fought me every inch of the way, but they gave it to a reporter. The 911 call, he all had it before I ever had it.
FOIA is the Freedom of Information Act.
Yeah, Freedom of Information Act.
Yeah.
So what happens? It's a process, and each state is different. They each have different laws and different. You got to study the statutes to understand what the process is. You got so many days to do this, so many days to do that, and there's a process. And if you don't meet those deadlines, then you can get thrown out of the FOIA. But the public body that you're sending the FOIA to, they aren't required to go by those deadlines. They let them get it by with. In fact, I've got 4 letters saying they violated FOIA and improperly withheld records from me and everything, but nothing. There's no consequences.
And so for the Freedom of Information Act, that gives you the right to ask for certain records. Is that changed from state to state, or is that a federal act?
Well, there's a federal act that has just blanket language, that's a generalized language. But in order to get appropriated money, each state has to enact their own set of FOIA statutes. And
Okay.
there's no consistency, there's no consistent method of doing it. Each state does what they want to.
Okay.
In Illinois, we have a pretty stringent FOIA system. You have to you do a request, and they have to answer you within 5 business days. If they don't, then you can appeal it to the Attorney General. And if they don't answer within 5 business days, there's no charge for any of the records when you finally do get them. There's all kinds of clauses like that, but you got to study that act yourself to really know that act by heart before you start the FOIA.
And so,
because it does make a big difference.
In cases like yours, what happens? What recourse do you have when you submit and file a Freedom of Information Act and you get no response within those 5 working days or whatever that state's criteria is? What recourse do you have?
Well, then you have the right to appeal to the Attorney General. It's called a public access counselor within the Illinois Attorney General's office. So you have the right, I think it's 7 days you have to appeal that. But then they can also ask for an extension of another 5 days to get responsive. There's all kinds of back and forth. There's exceptions to the rule, the exemptions, and all that. You got to study all those to know what they can. If it's an active and ongoing investigation, they can deny you because of that legitimately. But they have to prove that with clear and convincing evidence that it is an active and ongoing investigation. They can't just say we went out and interviewed one person and that makes it active and ongoing. They have to actually prove to the Attorney General that it's active and ongoing. If they can't, then they have to produce those records. And so then the Attorney General has 60 days to write a letter of determination. And a letter of determination determines whether they violated the FOIA Act and they have to turn the records over, but they don't have to honor the letter of determination of the public body, only a binding opinion. They can do 2 methods but this process goes on for about a year.
Right.
Each one.
And so your inability to get answers, your frustration with the system led you to fight for what is now known as Molly's Law, because you had used the proper channels, gone through the chain of command, done everything by the book, and you were still met with frustration and barriers at every turn. And so I want to read for the viewers what Molly Law is. And this is written by the Illinois Bar Journal, and they wrote it this way. Public Act 99-0587 is commonly known as Molly's Law. It amends the Wrongful Death Act, extending the statute of limitations for filing a wrongful death action in certain situations. When an individual dies as a result of violent, intentional conduct, the statute of limitations is extended to 5 years as opposed to the normal 2 years limitation period. And so in your situation, you went to file a suit against the former boyfriend only to find out that that 2-year statute of limitation had expired.
Well, because we were not getting any information from the investigative authorities,
Right.
our other method of finding out the truth is through wrongful death suit. He had no money. We knew we would get no
Right.
award out of it. We were
Right.
filing it to find out information, to find out the truth of what happened. But the problem is because we had no records to go to court with, the 2-year statute of limitations had ran out. So you can't go to court with he said, she said. You have to have documents. Right. And the police weren't forthcoming with any documents. So we held off as long as we could, and an attorney said we were 2 years and 3 months, and the statute of limitations was 2 years. He said that we could argue equitable tolling, which says that the clock doesn't start at the time of death, it starts when you get records. But okay. He took it before the judge and argued that, but the judge wouldn't accept that. We don't know why, but it didn't. It's a legitimate argument. So therefore, then we went to our congressperson. Actually, not Congress; they call them representatives here. Our representative. It wasn't ours. It was the representative of the district that this crime happened in. And she fought we told her what the problem was, and we need a law to stop this from happening, because all they got to do is wait 2 years and no one's held accountable. So she went and got the statute of limitations extended on wrongful death to 5 years because of that. And she also, and I worked with them. I went and testified before the Judicial Committee to explain why we needed to extend the statute of limitations and why we need to hold public bodies accountable. There's also the second part to that law, which is they get a stronger fine. They get, there's more penalties if they don't honor the FOIA statutes and try to circumvent them.
Okay. And so, because of your experience with the very system designed to help you, you put your pain into purpose and was instrumental behind Molly's loss. So thank you for that. I'm sorry that it took the loss of Molly for this to come about, but it will serve many people from here on out moving forward. And on that note, Molly's name will live on forever. Where are you today with getting answers?
Well, we spent 4 years through FOIA. We still don't have all the records. The last letter of determination I got, they said you violated FOIA, the public body violated FOIA by withholding these records from Mr. Young. You need to turn them over immediately. We have never seen him. That was last year. We got that letter.
Is that right?
Yeah. So I guess you have to question, why are they so trying to be so secretive as to what really happened in this case, and why are they not prosecuting this case?
Right. Well, okay. So, with him being a dispatcher, law enforcement dispatcher, they are like a family, right? And, I'm not here to bash law enforcement, because they are the good guys that stand between us and the bad guys. They put their own life on the line every single day to protect us. And that is, just something that we're all incredibly thankful for. However, every so often things go awry. And that is what we're focusing on here, is cases such as yours where families are fighting to find answers and the system is working against them. And in this case, Larry, to me, again, from the outside looking in, thinking this kid worked for law enforcement. And so it seems plausible that they're protecting their own, even if he was not, didn't wear a badge. I mean, if he was a dispatcher, that's going to be more of a civilian type of position rather than being out on the street with a gun, right? But still, do you think that that has anything to do with it?
Well, I've been told that's institutional protectionism.
So no matter what your position is within law
not because
enforcement.
he's a dispatcher, not because of his connections to law enforcement, because so many officers were involved in trying to make this into, just brush it under the rug. There's 15 Carbondale police officers and 20 state police officers.
Wow.
It went so far that way that there's no turning back, because they will ruin their institution's name to go after it.
Wow.
Even though they never expected, we had an inquest 10 months after it happened, and they ruled undetermined because they didn't present any of this evidence I told you about. Blood spatter on his pajamas. They didn't present any of that to the jury, only her journals.
Is that right?
Personal writings, yes. And they didn't present the trajectory. They didn't present her being right-handed, left-handed. We were allowed to ask 3 questions during that procedure.
Wow. So you were denied due diligence.
Yes. We were denied our constitutional rights. Molly's rights have been violated, trampled on, actually.
Yeah.
Along with ours.
Yeah.
So I guess I have to say, why is this going on? Because it's probably been going on for years, and we have 3 things now that prevent that from happening as much, and that's social media. Everybody has a camera in their pocket. And Freedom of Information Act. 10 or 15 years ago, we didn't have that, and we didn't have it any time prior to that. So this has all been going on, and everybody was just living the rosy life in a bubble and didn't realize that there's protection going on. There's picking and choosing who gets prosecuted and who doesn't.
Yep.
And it's getting exposed now all around the country. I think it's time for change. I think they need to realize they no longer can do this. To give you an example, that morning, when a dispatcher doesn't show up for work at 7 and he can't be reached, they send out a wellness check. It's standard procedure in almost every law enforcement agency. They said they didn't that morning, but since then, the chief of police was fired over this case. He has been interviewed by a national news agency, and he said they did a wellness check. He called in and made contact and told him he was going to be late for work.
Is that right?
Yes. It's on video recorded interview of him.
Wow.
So my question is why, when that gets put out in the public, and we gave that interview to the state police, why is he not being questioned as how he made contact? Because his alibi was that he didn't wake up till 2 minutes before the 911 call. So how did he call? How did he make contact? We have eyewitnesses across the parking lot that seen the Carbondale police there at 7:30 that morning in the parking lot.
Wow.
They won't interview that witness. Why?
Why? And I shake my head. It's really hard to wrap our brain around this. And again, it's not about bashing law enforcement. We rely upon them, to help us find the truth. And, we need them, but it's more about addressing the chain of command when you're seeking answers, the transparency, the due diligence, and asking for all cases to be treated equal, and not being thrown obstacles in your search for justice. And
Well,
again,
that very day,
what's that?
get into law enforcement. I was on the police and fire merit board. Our chief wore a Justice Smalley wristband and had two signs in his yard for years on this case. Chief of police in our town, my hometown. My brother-in-law was a retired 33-year captain of the Mount Vernon Police Force, which is about 60 miles away. He was our family spokesperson at the inquest.
Okay.
Three of my nephews are police officers. So I don't have anything against
Right.
police
Right.
officers either. But the problem is when you have a bad police officer. If you have, I mean, there's a police officer that actually we have a recorded interview now, telling the witness, his roommate, and that he's going to have to get a lawyer for him and the suspect. Why would he be telling him in an interview room that?
Yeah.
That they're going to Carbondale police are going to have to get them a lawyer.
Right.
And he
Right.
was a lieutenant on the Carbondale police force at the time. Now he's the assistant chief.
Yeah.
I have
So,
problems with that.
right. And so we're talking about this because you're not the only one who has a problem with it. And I want to show viewers that this book by retired detective, New York detective Dennis Griffin, was just released. And it is about this very subject. And so if you're a viewer and you have a case where you are fighting for information, you're fighting for answers, and you are feeling like you're not getting where you need to be, contact Dennis Griffin, and because he is instrumental behind opening this dialogue. And it's really, really important because, again, Larry, you're not the only one, sadly enough. But when we open this dialogue, we start shedding light on something. And that's the first step toward finding answers for families who are fighting. And they're just fighting for answers. In the book are different cases, and they're compelling. And, cases where it clearly appears to be murder, but law enforcement deemed it being suicide, such as it was, in your case, that suspicion came about of potential suicide of Molly. And although the evidence is clear. And so the cases in this book are compelling. It's available on Amazon. It's also Barnes and Nobles. You can order it from any mom and pop bookshop around the world. But we are talking about this. We're opening the dialogue. And in fact, one of the writers in here, Dr. Sarah Stein, she will be a guest on Moments of Hope here in the coming weeks, talking about what we call the missing white woman syndrome. And so I appreciate, Larry, you being on and sharing with us Molly's story. And I'm so sorry, from one bereaved parent to another, I am so sorry that this is your path, but I'm grateful to you for putting all your pain into making a difference for future families, because it shouldn't be this hard, right?
Well, one law I think that would help, and it needs to be national law, is that when local investigators and law enforcement say that they're stymied, they can't figure it out, they can't get enough evidence to prosecute, they can't do this, then the family should be allowed to bring in their own experts.
Yes.
And they accept that can come in. I have experts that have analyzed this case for 8 hours, retired FBI agents and everything, and they're ready to come in, but the local law enforcement will not let them.
We'll block
Now,
them.
I don't know if that's because of ego or cover-up, but it appears that it's they're not wanting them to find out the truth.
Right. It could be both. It could be both. But you're right. I mean, you families are paying your hard-earned money to bring in a neutral, outside, private investigator who is trained in this and trained to look at cases with fresh eyes from a neutral standpoint, finding compelling evidence and getting nowhere. And so I think you're right. I think that's an excellent law to bring about.
Even pro bono, there's people
Right.
that feel so strongly about it that they don't want just injustice to happen like this, so
Right.
they will come in pro bono and help them.
Right.
Obviously, most of the time, unless you're in a city, a real metropolitan area, rural areas, you're not going to have the expertise you need to solve a case as much as you would in a metropolitan where they went to, got a master's degree in it. There's no real requirements as to extensive investigative procedures by local and rural areas. People can become investigators without having a degree or a training or anything in it, and that's part of the problem. So if they're not, and I understand that, then they should allow people that do have that expertise to come in and solve it. And they're not doing that.
They're not doing that.
And that's going to be a law in order to get that accomplished.
Absolutely agreed. So what final words of wisdom do you have for families who have found themselves in your shoes? Any thoughts?
Go with your gut, and if you feel that there's suspicious circumstances involved, try to. It's hard to do. I know some people can't do it. You got to go in and dig, and you got to start asking for answers. You got to fight for those answers. You got to be prepared for the long haul. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take you maybe years, which it has us. But eventually, you will get the truth.
Mm. Good. Well, thank you.
The truth will prevail.
Yeah. Yeah. I think as a bereaved parent, there is some peace in having the truth. And I think that is very important for law enforcement to understand. There's so much heartache involved when you lose a child already. And of course, when you lose any loved one, your spouse, your parent, your sibling, the list goes on. But when it's, something where you don't have answers, you have endless questions. And when you have those answers, it brings comfort. And that's what I want law enforcement to know. Within the book Survivors by Dennis Griffin, there's also some points in there for families on how to navigate the system, because that's what the book is about opening that dialogue and how to try to get the answers that you're seeking. And so I just want to share that as well. So Larry, thank you so much for joining us tonight and for sharing your story, and bless you for all your hard work to bring about Molly's Law that was signed into law in 2016. And it will certainly serve, many families moving forward. So where can viewers, if they've got a question for you or want to contact you, where can they reach you at?
We have a website that has been inactive for a while. I just reactivated. It's called justiceformolly.org.
Okay.
Or justiceformolly.facebook. They're both linked together. Either one, they could contact me. And I'd be glad to help one that needs help.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight. What's that?
I took this on as sort of like a ministry to help people.
Yeah.
It's a hard thing to go through.
It is a hard thing to go through. Absolutely. Well, bless you for doing it, because you're touching more hearts than you'll ever know. So thank you for joining us tonight, Larry. And we're going to continue this conversation because this is a very important dialogue. In the meantime, do join us Friday night when we have the Hollywood mob Ori. I got my tongue there for a second. Friday night on the same page here on Facebook at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And we're going to get some interesting perspective from his side and come with your questions, because he's an open book and he's willing to share answers on anything that you ask. And so in the meantime, we're going to keep this dialogue going about the pursuit of police transparency and justice. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight, and you have a wonderful week. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you, Linda.
Bye-bye.